Hi, I'm Nikki Lowe and welcome to the Wisdom for Working Mums podcast show, where I share insights and interviews that support women to combine their family, work and life in a more successful and sustainable way. Welcome to this episode. I'm your host, Nikki Lowe, and today I'm sharing something that kind of blew my mind the first time I discovered it. And it's something that I've used a lot in my professional life, but never considered applying it to me as a mother. And it's the concept of using personality profiling to discover your mothering type. And if you're like me, you naturally kind of understand that your personality type influences, the type of career you might be drawn to, the type of job roles you might be good at, and the type of leader that you'll be. What your strengths and development areas might be in the workplace and how you communicate with your colleagues about your natural preferences. So you might find yourself saying, I'm a big picture thinker, so I don't naturally go into detail. You might ask people to help you think through how you present information so you don't miss a small print. Or maybe you might think, actually, I'm an introvert, so back-to-back meetings drain me by the end of the day. So you might look at negotiating about how you hold meetings on different days so that you're not draining yourself. Or maybe you might think, I'm really good at planning and organising. Give me a project plan and I'm in heaven. But sometimes the uncertainty and chaos of particular projects at work might not play to your preferences. The idea of personality profiling is not new. It's been around since the ancient Greeks, and where one of the Greek philosophers, who was a medical doctor, identified that his patients behaved in 4 quite different and distinctive ways. And then over 2,000 years later, the psychologist Carl Jung identified the differences in personality types. So it's been around for a long, long time. But in this episode, we're going to be linking the ancient Greeks with modern psychology, but in the context of motherhood. And I hope it's going to open up a whole new way of thinking for you, like it did for me. One that helps you be more of yourself in motherhood, to bring the best of yourself and have actually more compassion for yourself too, which was definitely what happened for me when I gained these insights, because they were pretty transformational. But I really wondered, why did it take me so long to even consider applying personality profiling to me as a mother? When I had that aha moment, I then got really curious about why I'd never thought about applying it in the context of me as a mother before, because it was really strange for me. My mind thinks in this way naturally. I'm always looking at people and psychology and preferences and how they apply to particular situations. It's the way my mind's always worked, and that's why I've been drawn to do the work that I do. So I was like, why have I never thought about doing this in motherhood before? And then I realised. But before I share with you why I hadn't, could you do me a huge favour, please? Can you share this episode with 2 or 3 working mums that pop in your head as you listen? As you know, my mission is to support as many working mums on their journey as possible. So I'd be grateful if you supported them by offering them this free podcast. I hope it's useful for you, and if it is, I hope you pass it on. And also, please consider rating and reviewing my show. Your review can help another mum find my podcast, and also it helps me to attract the best guests for the show. And also, I love to go in and read them. So just click the ratings and review and write a review where you listen to this podcast and let me know your feedback. Thank you. So let's get back to discovering your mothering style. It was while I was getting curious as to why I'd left all my leadership and psychological training off the table when I was looking at myself as a mother that I realised that I'd gotten caught up in the myth of the perfect mother. When we become a mother, unbeknown to us, we enter this social role that becomes full of expectations, judgments, stereotypes, and it's almost like the water we swim in. Fish don't know the water, they just swim in it. And often we're the same. We can't see the water that we're swimming in. It's kind of our socialisation. It's almost like the unconscious training we fall into in our culture and society. So we can fall into this trap of the perfect mother completely unconsciously, And that's not always the case. Some of us are conscious of it, but how conscious are we? Which means that we can kind of be conditioned to believe that being a mother is the most natural thing. We have limitless patience and also love giving our children this intellectual stimulation, that we'll enjoy baking and messy play, but we'll also love taking care of the practicalities for our children, that we'll love spending every moment with our child, but at the same time, we'll also have the perfect body and always look great and our houses look tidy. And we can judge ourselves by these perfect rules of motherhood. So we can feel like we're not good enough, and it leaves us feeling exhausted trying to keep up with this unobtainable myth of the perfect mother. And I realised that's why I'd never applied the concept of personality types to motherhood, because I'd fallen into this trap of the perfect mother, that there was this one right way to be a mother, regardless of your personality. And that's crazy, right? When I started to see this, it kind of blew my mind. And I now see it with my clients when they have that realization. So it's easy to get caught up in this trap of being the perfect mother. It's all too easy to focus on our struggles and overlook our strengths. But it makes sense that we each bring different strengths and interests, preferences and values to our mothering. And we can enjoy the most success and freedom when we focus on being our best selves, not our perfect kind of mother myth. Because your children, and you know this, your children don't need a perfect mum. They need a mother who can model for them how to make the most of their strengths, accept their limitations, and manage their kind of humanness to become the best that they can be. So this podcast is all about recognising there's no right way to be a good mother. We each bring our different strengths, interests, values, preferences to our mothering journey. And your strengths of your mothering style are partly determined by your unique personality. And you're going to enjoy the most success and satisfaction when you focus on your strengths rather than your shortcomings. And every mother has strengths and struggles. But what about your strengths and your struggles? That's where knowing your mothering style can be so powerful. And we have to start exploring your personality type to uncover it. So knowing your mothering style is really empowering because it helps you to really trust your innate strengths and gain confidence in your own natural approach to mothering. It enables you to be more realistic and accepting of your struggles, knowing that we all have them. And it can free you up from the stress and guilt about not measuring up to the myth of this perfect mother. And it can help you to learn how to recharge and protect your energy. It can strengthen your kind of parent-child relationship and your co-parenting relationships. And it can help you navigate the demands of your life with more ease based on your own individual needs. Sounds great, doesn't it? And we're going to be using the theory of personality type to do this. And specifically, we're going to be using the work created by the mother and daughter team, Isabel Myers and Catherine Briggs, to explore this. And you've probably come across it or heard about it before. And you may have even done this in depth before. So it's the Myers-Briggs type indicator, and it's often known as MBTI. And I just want you to know there are a million different ways that we could be looking at this. So it isn't that MBTI is the best way. It can just provide a framework, and there are a number of different ones out there. You may have used Insights before, you may have used Clarity 4D. There are a number of different personality tools that basically take the basis of this and present it in different ways. So there's no right way, but I'm just going to share with you one way that may be useful for you to start exploring your mothering style. And what I'll say is, actually, I'm going to be sharing some detail on this podcast, but if you're a visual learner, it may not be the best way for you to process this. So I'm keen to understand if you would like me to do a workshop on this. So at the end, I'll remind you again, but if you would, drop me a note on social media or email, and I'm happy to do more of a workshop style around this, because for me, it's such a fundamental thing for us to learn and understand about ourselves that hopefully this podcast gives you the starting point. But if you want to dive a bit deeper, I'm happy to share more details. So just let me know if that would be of interest. So personality type can help us understand ourselves and how we operate by focusing on 4 key areas. So the first area is about where you focus your attention and get your energy. and it's known as the Introversion Extroversion scale. And that's probably one that you're most familiar with. We use that in our everyday language. The second kind of area that we look at is what information do you attend to most? And this scale is known as the sensing or intuition scale. And I'll get into more detail about these in a minute. The third area is how do you make your judgments and decisions? Are you more of a thinker or a feeler? And where are you on that scale? And how do you like your outer world structured is the fourth area, which is known as judging or perceiving in the MBTI. So we've got extroversion, introversion for where we get our energy. We've got sensing or intuition about what information do we focus on most. We've got the thinking or feeling about how we make judgments and decisions. And then we've got judging or perceiving about how we like our outer world structured. And these four scales are almost like the basic building blocks of your personality type. And according to the theory, within each of those four pairs, people are born with preference for one over the other. Now, this preference is a lot like your natural preference for using your left or right hand. Even though you can depend on and use both of your hands, kind of one feels more comfortable and easier than the other. And the same is going to be true for your personality type and your preference. You can use all 8 of those, but in each pair, you will feel truer to who you are kind of along that scale. So what I'm going to talk you through are some descriptions, and I just want you to think of how you are naturally, not how you think you should be or how other people want you to be or how perhaps you've learned to be. I just want you to access that part of yourself that you do without conscious effort. So as we start to look at your kind of instinctive self, the first scale, as I said, is this extroversion and introversion. And I want you to imagine these on a spectrum. At one end, you've got the pure extrovert, and at the other end, you've got the pure introvert. And obviously, we're never purely one or the other. You know, life is not kind of black and white. It's where you are along that kind of grey scale, really. So if we think about energy and this extroversion and introversion, I want you to think about where do you focus your attention and get your energy? So on the extroversion side of the spectrum, you'd be energized by other people and things and external experience. You're kind of expressive and easy to know because you kind of make it known externally. You prefer activity and want to contribute to the action. And you like to process things externally and really talk things out. And kind of the key words that you might relate to kind of extroverts are they outward, they go and do, they like many, they like people, they like action, and they like breadth. And on the other end of that scale is the introversion. And you'd be energized by the inner world of ideas and reflections. If you're an introvert, you tend to be more contained and reserved, tend to prefer solitude and calm, and like to work alone, and like to process internally, to really think things through on the inside. So the introversion keywords are inward, stop and think, few, solitude, reflection, and depth. And just instinctively, where would you put yourself on that continuum? Do you see yourself more extrovert, more introvert, or more of a balance? And there's no right place to be with this. This is just about working out where you are naturally. Each of those sides of the spectrum has its pros and cons. There's not right or wrong. It just is what it is. And this is where it gets really interesting, applying it to the context of motherhood, because the strengths of an extroverted mother will be they enjoy getting out and taking their children out to experience the world. They like being on the go and involved in a variety of activities, and they thrive at kind of being on a busy pace. They tend to provide their children with opportunities to be with people, and they tend to teach their children the importance of social skills and graces so they can get along in the world. And they tend to enjoy casual conversation with their children, you know, being free to ask lots of questions. And they tend to enjoy connecting with and tuning into the world beyond home, kind of being in the know when it comes to their community or their school or their neighbourhood. And they're kind of strengths are providing the spark to get things going and keep things moving. And they kind of serve as this example of kind of get up and go, let's just connect with the world. And they enjoy connecting with people and high energy of them. And in a large family gathering, you'll notice that they're the person with the energy to talk and connect and organise stuff. But on the flip side, the struggles of an extroverted mum is that they really find it hard being isolated at home with babies or preschoolers. And tuning out the social and other expectations of the external world, they find difficult. And they worry whether their children have enough friends or activities. So they might struggle with overextending, kind of putting themselves out there too much in their children. Another struggle might be they struggle to respect a child's personal space because they're so used to being externally connected. And they might tend to struggle with listening rather than talking because they might be used to more talkative approach, and that can mean that they could dominate conversation with a child. They might also struggle to understand or accept or even encourage a child's alone time, particularly if that child's introverted. And then if we look at the strengths of an introverted mother, they tend to be really good at observing and reflecting on their children's behaviour in order to get to know them in a deep way. They're good at encouraging their children not to overextend themselves by providing the time and space for downtime. And they tend to be good at respecting and understanding a child's need for alone time. And respecting a child who's not one of the crowd, who doesn't want to always be socialising. And they tend to be good at providing kind of a quiet and calming presence, although they may not feel calm on the inside. They might be good at tuning out distractions and concentrating on one child or one thing at a time. And they're good at limiting the external involvements to focus more on kind of exclusivity of their own family. And they might be good at standing back and watching their child be active and interact on their own rather than feeling they've got to get in there with them. But on the flip side, an introverted mother will probably struggle with being focused outwards on children at the task at hand. That might push them beyond their natural extrovert limits. And they might struggle with the conflict between the need to tune out distractions and their family's needs to interact. And also handling large family or large groups of people they might struggle with, and finding the energy to maintain the pace of young children and adolescents that naturally need more interaction. And they might struggle to responding on the spot to a child's unexpected requests, like not having that time to think or reflect might be a struggle. And also they might struggle with being as emotionally and cognitively accessible to their child as they might think they need to be. And also they might struggle to understand an extroverted child's need to be on the go with friends and activities and to think out loud. And for me, this was a really powerful area when I reflected on my own mothering style. My firstborn is highly extroverted. And in my younger years, I thought I was more of an extrovert. And what I've recognised is I'm more balanced. I can do extroversion and I need some of that. But if I'm in that space for too long, it's incredibly draining for me. And I hadn't anticipated how draining I would find those first years of being a new mum with an extroverted child. And I had to develop strategies to feed the introversion part of me to be able to maintain the energetic level I needed for my firstborn. And when I had that realisation, it was massively enlightening and empowering and took away really the guilt and shame I was feeling about why I was struggling. So the second scale is about the kind of information you pay the most attention to and trust the most. And it's on this scale of sensing versus intuition. So if you're more on the sensing side of the spectrum, you'll use your 5 senses to kind of pay attention. So you'll be looking at what you can see, what you can hear, what you can smell, what you can taste. And I know that might sound like, doesn't everybody do that? But when you come to hear the intuition side, you'll kind of get to see where the difference is. It's not that you're not using your 5 senses, obviously, but it's where you pay the most attention and trust the most. So on the sensing side, it's about your 5 senses, and you tend to live in the here and now more, enjoying just what's in front of you. and you will pay attention to more what's concrete information, what's real, and tend to take like a step-by-step approach. So the key words you might relate to if you were sensing is kind of common sense, details, being present, realism, facts, practicalities. Whereas if you're more on the intuition side of the spectrum, you'll pay attention more to your sixth sense, your hunches, your intuition, that's why it's called it, you have that gut feel. And you might live towards the future more, anticipating and planning what might be. And you tend to be more in the abstract about what could be versus what is. And you'll usually kind of proceed by leaping around with these bursts of energy. So the key words for intuition on that side of the spectrum you might relate to is being more imaginative, being about patterns and future and theories and innovation and possibilities. So the strengths of a sensing mother are that you'll be good at taking care of the practicalities and the basics and giving your children the hands-on practical understanding about how to get along in the world. You'll be good at showing your care in concrete ways, so cleaning clothes, healthy food on the table, and providing your children with rich sensory experiences, a trip to the park or the museum, and valuing and conveying the importance of kind of family traditions. And you put the importance on the practical side of intelligence, common sense, applied knowledge, and getting facts straight. Your strengths will be keeping life simple and grounded in the here and now, and creating a comfortable physical surrounding and home environment for your family. So your home will tend to be quite organised. Whereas the struggles of a sensing mother is that you might struggle with appreciating and joining in with your child's imagination and fantasy play. You might be overly focused on details and small incidents rather than the bigger picture. And you might struggle to understand a child who's different from the norm or different from you. You might struggle to see possibilities in complicated or difficult situations. And you might feel overwhelmed and stressed out by all the details and things to do. And you might struggle to appreciate an intuitive child's like big picture and orientation. And on the flip side, the strengths of an intuitive mother, kind of pointing out options and possibilities and offering your children choices. You'll probably be good at looking for and encouraging kind of the unique potential in each of your children and bringing imagination and novel approach to kind of ordinary and routine things. You might be good at explaining ideas and insights and perspectives and meanings behind everyday experiences. You might offer metaphors and, to explain stuff. You'll probably be good at valuing your child's quickness of understanding and insights into kind of complexity and flashes of originality. And you might be good at seeking out new techniques and perspectives on parenting. You'll probably be good at keeping sight of the big picture, valuing kind of mothering as a personal growth experience and a catalyst for developing your own unique potential. But the struggles of an intuitive mother are kind of unrealistic expectations, often living with ideals, particularly about time. I can relate to that. You might struggle with living in the here and now and taking pleasure in the moment. You might also struggle with keeping things simple because you can see lots of possibilities and therefore can make things more complicated. You might struggle with knowing how much time and detailed effort a task will take, either underestimating or sometimes overestimating that. And you might struggle to give your children specific, concrete instructions. So you might struggle appreciating if you've got a sensing child who likes that step-by-step practical approach to learning. So just notice, check in with what I've said. Which of those can you feel relates more to you? And you might relate to both, but just if you were leaning to one side of the spectrum, which would it be? And the third scale is all about decisions, how you prefer to come to decisions and conclusions. And it's this thinking and feeling scale. So if you're more thinking, you tend to decide with your head more, and you're concerned with truth and justice and fairness. And you tend to be more sceptical and take nothing for granted. And you might value logic and trust more. And you might ask, what do you think about? So the kind of words that are thinking related would be head, firm and fair, you analyse, you're about justice, you're objective, and you tend to critique. Whereas if you're more on the feeling side, you decide more with your heart and you're concerned more with relationships and harmony. You tend to be more affirming and accepting, and you tend to be more about value and trusting gut feel. You might ask, how do you feel about, rather than how do you think about? So the key words for the feeling side of the spectrum about heart and compassionate and empathise and harmony and subjective and more compliments. So based on those descriptions, just instinctively, where would you put yourself on the continuum? And thinking about the strengths of a thinking mother, you'll be good at giving your children the physical and psychological space they need to stand on their own 2 feet and become more independent. You might be good at helping your children analyse situations and problem solve. And you'll probably pay attention to how your children think things through, encouraging them to think for themselves and think independently. You're probably good at fostering ongoing intellectual development by teaching and talking and discussing things on kind of a mature level, answering your children's whys. You might be more about encouraging competence and can-do attitude, helping them excel in school and do their best and kind of work to those standards. And you'll probably be about encouraging children to seek justice and fairness in all situations and tend to rely on logical consequences and cause and effect as the method of teaching and kind of modifying behaviour. And you're probably good at providing your children the role model for kind of this competent, independent woman. But on the flip side, you might struggle with tuning into and being patient with feelings and maintaining the energy for lengthy, emotionally charged discussions, particularly relating to personal issues or relationships. You might struggle with accepting your child as he or she is and not being critical or expecting greater success. And you might struggle with feeling comfortable with and confident with like a clingy, needy or an overly sensitive child. You might struggle with picking up the cues in those delicate situations and hanging in there when there's no clear-cut answer or solution. And it might be difficult to not sound harsh or critical. And on the flip side, the strengths of a feeling mother are that they're good at giving children physical, emotional closeness that they need to feel loved, special and secure. And it's not that a thinking mother doesn't do that, but they just do it in a different way. Strengths of a feeling mother are that they tend to pay close attention to how their children feel and tuning in and being more responsive to their children's needs. They're good at fostering harmony by encouraging and expecting cooperation and give and take. And they tend to see mothering as the kind of grandest of intimacies, connecting with those feelings. And they tend to look for what's good in their child and kind of do more sharing and confiding. And they might want to protect their child more from life's hard knocks. But on the flip side, a feeling mother might struggle with keeping their emotions separate from their children's issues. There's more kind of contamination of their own emotions with that. They might struggle with confrontation, being able to say no or being firm and direct. They might struggle with their own needs, getting identified and even met, because they're kind of enmeshed with the feelings of their family. They might struggle with dealing with multiple wants and constant demands, feeling overwhelmed if everyone in the family needs something from you at the same time. It's like, oh, how do I meet everybody's needs simultaneously? And you might struggle from separating from your children too. So kind of, particularly when your children are young, that separation hits you more in terms of the feelings. Whereas a thinking mother, it's not that they don't care and they don't feel it, but they'll probably use their logic to justify it and rationalise it more. Struggle of a feeling mother is you might hold your children too close and become almost overprotective and kind of feel guilty whenever your attention hasn't been 100% on your children's needs. Now we move on to the fourth and final scale. And this is about how you like your outer world structured. And it's on this kind of spectrum of judging versus perceiving. So if you're more judging, you tend to use plans and you're more comfortable in providing and being based on plans and stability. You probably aim to structure your life and you like to do one thing at a time logically, and you want to be prepared and not caught out by surprise. So the kind of words that you might relate to are being structured, about closure, planned, organised and in control. Where if you're more on the perceiving end of the spectrum, your plans you might more open to unexpected opportunity, and you aim to just let life happen, and you're more productive doing several things at once, and you like to take things as they come, and you probably respond well to the unexpected. So the perceiving words are around flow and openness and spontaneity. You'll probably be more flexible and adaptable. So just as I've said those kind of words and descriptions, what do you notice you relate to more? Where would you find yourself? More on that judging or more on that perceiving end of the spectrum? So the strength of a judging mother is that they're really good at planning and organise the day-to-day living, and they can keep their children on an even keel with set meal times and bedtimes and family routines. And they're pretty good at guiding and shaping their children about who they become. And they're quite good at setting limits and being directive and really making a smooth running and orderly household a priority. And they can show their children how to get a lot done and encourage children to respect and use their time wisely. But on the flip side, they might struggle with living with the never completed aspects of housekeeping and childcare. And they might struggle to adapt into the unexpected and coping with last minute changes that impact their plan. You might struggle with letting go of the shoulds and needing to have things done the right way and giving up control so your children can take increased control of their own lives. You might struggle with relaxing and having fun when things still need to get done, or hearing your children out before making judgments. You might struggle with functioning in the midst of all the children's clutter, disorder, commotion and mess. And then if we look at the perceiving side of the spectrum, the strengths of a perceiving mum are they're pretty good at being tolerant and accepting, more likely to be spontaneous and being responsive to their children's interruptions. You're likely to be good at staying open-minded when listening to your children and exposing your children to a variety of kind of experiences and people. And you'd probably be pretty good at letting your children make their own choices and being relaxed about how they do that and relaxed about clutter and disorder and chaos. As long as they're having fun, it doesn't matter. You tend to be more easygoing and relaxed when it comes to milk spills or when plans get upset or children misbehave or there's an illness or kind of just the plans get thrown up in the air. Whereas the struggles of a perceiving mother is they might struggle to keep their household organised and in order. And they might struggle with keeping yourself and your children on task and on time. You might struggle with not leaving things until the last minute or letting things go too far. You might struggle with living with day-to-day routines and everyday sameness. And you might struggle with juggling everyone else's schedules, even though your children's exposure to new experiences is a priority. And you might struggle with setting limits for your children and being consistent and following through. So hopefully by now you're getting really curious as to what your mothering style is. And the more you can tune into your natural style and strengths, it can free you from the stress and guilt about not measuring up to this myth of the perfect mother. You can start to trust your innate strengths and navigate the demands of life and motherhood with more ease based on your individual needs. And I really hope you give this a go, as I know it will help you step more into your personal power and give you the freedom to flourish as a working mum. Hopefully, these insights have been useful, but it's useful to remember we're always more unique and complicated than our type. Your mothering style is really best used as a starting point for getting to know yourself better, and it's kind of a door opener to a deeper, less biased and more compassionate connection to yourself and to your family and everybody around you. And it's also useful to remember that your type doesn't dictate what you can and can't do. It doesn't limit you. It helps you to understand what you do naturally and whether what you do energizes you or drains you. And these insights are designed to help you become more of yourself in motherhood. And kind of being yourself is like a deepening and expanding process. And according to Jung and Myers, the origins of this work, what you are, in other words, your type, never changes, but who you are within that type never stops changing. So kind of this is an ongoing process of reflection. And your children will be the best that they can be when they see you being your true self. And just become the best version of you and know that your children can follow your lead. And I really want to thank Janet P. Penley for inspiring this important work. It was when I read her book on mothering styles that these light bulb moments started to happen. And I just thank her for the work she did in doing this. I really hope that as you've listened to this episode, it sparked ideas on your mothering style so you can embrace your natural preferences and instinctive self and stop comparing yourself to other mothers. We all do it. I remember seeing mothers walk around the supermarket with like 3 or 4 children, letting them throw whatever in the shopping trolley, and me thinking, oh my God, how's she doing that without them freaking out? When I go in there, I want to get in and out as quickly as possible. I've got a process, and if I take my children with me, they throw that process out. So I've got to be in a particular energetic place to be able to take my children food shopping so that I can be calm and patient and go with the flow, because that's not something that naturally comes to me. And so once I recognise, that's just my personality type, it doesn't mean I'm a bad mother. It stopped me unfavourably comparing myself, looking at another mother's strengths and comparing my struggles. And I'd love to hear any insights you've had from this episode. So drop me a note on social media or email me. I genuinely would love to hear. And as I said at the beginning, if you'd be interested in me hosting a workshop to do a deeper dive on discovering your mothering style, as I appreciate kind of a podcast is harder for visual learners to kind of process that information, let me know. I'd be up for it. I just need to know that there's enough of you that would be interested in me doing a digital workshop. So drop me an email and I can get that sorted. So thanks ever so much for hanging out with me in this episode. And could you do me that huge favour, please? Can you share this episode with 1, 2, or maybe 3 working mums that pop into your head as you listen? As you know, my mission is to support as many working mums as possible on that journey. So I'd be grateful if you could support them by offering this free podcast. I hope it's been useful for you. And if it has, you can pass it on to another mum or 2, please. Thanks so much for tuning in. Until next time, take care. If you've enjoyed this episode of Wisdom for Working Mums, please share it on social media and with your friends and family. I'd love to connect with you too, so if you head over to wisdomforworkingmums.co.uk, you'll find a link on how to do this. And if you love the show and really want to support it, please go to iTunes, write a review and subscribe. You'll be helping another working mum find this resource too. Thanks so much for listening.